Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before the Galactic Defense Council, her weathered hands gripping a data pad that contained humanity's last hope. The vast chamber buzzed with alien voices, their words dripping with barely concealed mockery. Around the circular amphitheater, representatives from dozens of species sat in their ornate seats, their eyes fixed on the small human woman at the center. "So, this is what Earth sends us?" chittered Ambassador Kethrak, his insectoid mandibles clicking in what passed for laughter among his kind. "A single human female with delusions of grandeur?" Elena's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. She had heard worse during her 30 years as a xenobiologist and military strategist. The other species had always underestimated humanity, viewing them as a primitive race that had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. What they didn't understand was that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their technology, but in their ability to adapt and survive against impossible odds. "Council members," Elena began, her voice cutting through the ambient noise like a blade. 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected an anomaly in the Kepler 442 system. What we found there should terrify every sentient being in this galaxy. The holographic display behind her flickered to life, showing a star map with a growing dark region at its center. Red dots marked the positions of destroyed worlds, their number increasing with each passing day. The Devourers had arrived, and they were consuming everything in their path. "These entities," Elena continued, "are unlike anything we've encountered before. They don't conquer worlds, they unmake them. They strip planets down to their molecular components and use the raw materials to build more of themselves. Our initial estimates suggest they could consume the entire Orion arm within 5 years." A low murmur rippled through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegate, a tall being with crystalline skin, leaned forward. "And what exactly do you propose, human? Our combined fleets are already mobilizing." Elena's lips curved into a grim smile. "Your fleets won't be enough. The Devourers adapt to conventional weapons faster than we can deploy them. But I've discovered something about their neural networks, something that everyone else has missed." She activated another display, showing complex biological diagrams and neural pathway mappings. "The Devourers share a collective consciousness, but it's not quantum-based like most hive minds. It's bioelectric, operating on frequencies that resonate with organic neural tissue. I believe I can disrupt their entire network, but I need resources that only this council can provide." The chamber erupted in skeptical voices. "Impossible," shouted the Altarian representative. "Our greatest scientists have studied these creatures for months. And where has that gotten you?" Elena shot back. "How many worlds have fallen while your greatest scientists debated theories? I'm offering you a solution, not a dissertation." Chancellor Vexitar, the elderly Centaurian who led the council, raised a clawed hand for silence. "Dr. Vasquez, your reputation precedes you. We know of your unconventional methods during the Proxima conflict, but this seems beyond even your capabilities." Elena had expected this response. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 70 years, and they were still seen as newcomers despite their contributions to several conflicts. The other species remembered when humans were confined to a single world, struggling with their own primitive wars. "I'm not asking you to believe in me," Elena said, her voice steady. "I'm asking you to give me the chance to prove you wrong." Again, the reference wasn't lost on the council members. Elena Vasquez had been the architect of humanity's victory in 3 separate conflicts, each time using tactics that the other species had deemed impossible or insane. She had a gift for seeing patterns where others saw chaos, for finding weaknesses where others saw only strength. "What do you need?" Chancellor Vexitar asked after a long pause. Elena's datapad displayed a list of requirements that made several delegates gasp. "I need access to the Kepler Station Research Facility, a team of volunteers from each major species, and authorization to modify the quantum resonance chambers in ways that violate 17 separate safety protocols." "You're asking us to trust you with technology that could destroy star systems," protested the Syrian ambassador. "Yes," Elena replied simply, "because if you don't, the Devourers will destroy them anyway." The debate that followed lasted 6 hours. Elena stood in the center of the chamber, answering questions and deflecting criticism with the patience of someone who had spent decades proving skeptics wrong. She watched as fear gradually overcame prejudice in the faces around her. The reports from the front lines were getting worse by the hour, and conventional tactics were failing at every turn. Finally, Chancellor Vextar called for a vote. The result was closer than Elena had hoped, but it was enough. She had her authorization, her resources, and most importantly, her chance to save the galaxy from an enemy that no one else understood. As the council session ended and the delegates filed out, many of them shaking their heads in disapproval, Elena remained standing in the center of the chamber. She knew what they were thinking. The crazy human woman was going to get them all killed with her wild theories and reckless experiments. They had thought the same thing before the Battle of Wolf 359, when she had suggested using stellar radiation to disrupt enemy communications. They had mocked her plan to seed asteroid fields with explosive nanites during the Vega campaign. Each time they had been proven wrong. This time would be no different. Elena Vasquez had stared into the abyss of extinction before, and she had never blinked first. The Devourers might be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, but they had never faced anything like humanity's capacity for impossible solutions. As she walked toward the exit, Elena's mind was already racing ahead to the challenges that awaited her. She had 3 weeks to modify alien technology in ways that defied physics, assemble a team of scientists who barely trusted her, and develop a weapon that could stop an enemy that seemed unstoppable. The other species saw an impossible task. Elena Vasquez saw Tuesday. The Kepler Station research facility orbited a dying star, its massive structure gleaming against the backdrop of cosmic radiation. Elena stood in the observation deck, watching as transport ships arrived with her new team members. Each species had sent their most expendable scientists, she noted with bitter amusement. They were giving her their rejects and misfits, expecting her to fail. Perfect. She had always worked better with outcasts. Dr. Zixathera was the first to arrive, a Altarian whose crystalline exoskeleton showed the telltale fractures of someone who had been exiled from their collective. The Altarians valued conformity above all else, and Zixathera had apparently committed the unforgivable sin of original thinking. Dr. Vasquez, the alien scientist said, their voice resonating through their crystal structure, I must confess I volunteered for this assignment. My colleagues believe your theories are madness, but I have studied your previous work. You see patterns that others cannot. Elena smiled. Good. I need people who aren't afraid to break rules. What did you get exiled for? I suggested that our collective consciousness might be improved by allowing individual variation. My peers found this concept disturbing. Their loss is my gain. You'll be working on neural network analysis. I need someone who understands both collective and individual consciousness. The next arrival was Captain Thoric, a Ursani warrior whose species was known for their straightforward approach to problem-solving. His massive frame barely fit through the station's doorways, and his scarred hide told the story of countless battles. Elena knew why he was hero. The Ursani military had branded him a coward for retreating from an unwinnable battle. Human, Thoric rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. My superiors sent me here to die with honor. They believe your mission is suicide. It might be, Elena admitted. But if we succeed, we'll save every world in the galaxy. If we fail, at least we'll fail fighting something worthy of our efforts. Thoric's predatory grin revealed rows of sharp teeth. I like you, small human. You speak of death as if it were an old friend. The rest of the team trickled in over the next few hours. Dr. Quinteri, a Zephyrian who had been cast out for her unconventional theories about quantum mechanics. Lieutenant Commander Vash, a Centaurian, who had been court-martialed for insubordination. Engineer Mokhtal, a Syrian whose experimental tendencies had resulted in 3 spectacular explosions and a lifetime ban from working on military projects. Elena looked around the conference room at her assembled team of misfits and rejects. In the eyes of their respective governments, these beings were failures, outcasts, and liabilities. To Elena, they were exactly what she needed. Let me be clear about something, she began, standing at the head of the table. You're all here because your own people gave up on you. They sent you to me expecting you to fail and die quietly. I'm here to tell you that you're going to prove them wrong. She activated the holographic display, showing the latest intelligence reports from the front lines. The dark region on the star map had grown larger, and the rate of consumption was accelerating. Entire systems were vanishing every few days. The Devourers aren't just eating matter, Elena continued. They're converting it into more Devourers. Each world they consume makes them stronger, faster, more efficient. Traditional warfare is useless against them because they adapt faster than we can modify our tactics. Dr. Zixthera leaned forward, their fractured exoskeleton catching the light. But you believe their collective consciousness is their weakness? Not their weakness, Elena corrected. Their blindness. They're so focused on efficiency and collective thought that they can't conceive of true individuality. They see patterns, but they don't understand chaos. She pulled up her research. Months of data gathered from deep space observations and analysis of the few fragments of Devourer technology that had been recovered. Their neural network operates on predictable frequencies. It's incredibly sophisticated, but it's also rigid. They can adapt to any threat they understand. But they can't adapt to something that operates outside their comprehension. Engineer Mokhtal, whose tentacles were already twitching with excitement, spoke up in his translated voice. You want to create a frequency that disrupts their entire network? More than that, Elena said. I want to create a feedback loop that will overload their collective consciousness. But to do that, I need to modify the quantum resonance chambers in ways that will probably violate the laws of physics. And if the chambers overload? Asked Commander Vash. Elena's expression was grim. The resulting quantum cascade could destroy this entire system. But if we do nothing, the Devourers will consume every world in the galaxy within 5 years. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They were talking about a weapon that could save the galaxy or destroy it, operated by a team of scientists that their own governments considered expendable. I need to know right now, Elena said. Are you willing to risk everything on the theories of a human that everyone thinks is crazy? One by one, they nodded. Dr. Zixthera was the first, followed by the others. They had all been cast out by their own kind, labeled as failures and misfits. But Elena saw something different in them. She saw the spark of creativity that came from thinking outside established parameters. Over the next few days, Elena watched her team work with a dedication that surprised even her. Dr. Zixthera spent 18-hour shifts analyzing Devourer neural patterns, finding correlations that had escaped the attention of the galaxy's best scientists. Engineer Mokhtal threw himself into modifying the quantum chambers, his natural tendency toward dangerous experimentation finally finding a worthy outlet. The work was dangerous and exhausting. Several team members were injured when an experimental frequency burst overloaded their equipment. The station's medical bay became a second home for burns, neural feedback injuries, and exhaustion-induced collapses. But they were making progress. Each day brought new discoveries, new insights into the nature of their enemy. Elena found herself working alongside beings she had never imagined she could trust, let alone call friends. The other species might have sent her their rejects, but Elena was beginning to realize that she had been given exactly what she needed. These weren't failures, they were visionaries who had been rejected because their ideas were too radical for conventional thinking. As the first week came to an end, Elena stood once again in the observation deck, looking out at the dying star. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of her team working through the night, pushing themselves beyond their limits in pursuit of an impossible goal. They were still being mocked throughout the galaxy. The news feeds were full of criticism and doubt about the mad human's desperate gambit. But Elena had learned long ago not to listen to critics. She had work to do. The first breakthrough came at 0347 hours on day 12, when Dr. Zixthera's analysis revealed something that changed everything Elena thought she knew about the Devourers. The Altarian scientist had been working for 36 straight hours, their fractured exoskeleton glowing with exhaustion as they processed terabytes of neural pattern data. Dr. Vasquez, Zixthera called out, their voice resonating with excitement despite their fatigue. You need to see this immediately. Elena rushed to the analysis station, where holographic displays showed the intricate web of Devourer neural connections. But there was something new in the data, something that made Elena's blood run cold. They're not just connected, Zixthera explained, highlighting specific neural pathways. They're learning from us. Every engagement, every tactic we use, every defensive measure we deploy, it's all being processed and shared across their entire network. But look at this pattern here. The display zoomed in on a cluster of neural nodes that pulsed with a different frequency than the rest. Elena stared at the pattern, her mind racing to understand its implications. That's not adaptation, she whispered. That's anticipation. They're not just learning from our past actions, wow. They're predicting our future ones. The revelation sent shockwaves through the team. If the Devourers could predict their tactics, then any conventional assault would be doomed before it began. But Elena saw something else in the data, something that filled her with both hope and terror. Sixth Era, run a probability analysis on those prediction nodes. I need to know how far ahead they're thinking. The results were staggering. The Devourers weren't just planning for the next battle or the next system. They were calculating strategies that extended months, possibly years into the future. They had already mapped out the complete conquest of the galaxy, accounting for every possible resistance strategy the combined fleets might employ. How is this possible? Demanded Captain Thoric, his massive frame trembling with barely controlled rage. No consciousness, collective or otherwise, should be able to process variables on this scale. Elena was quiet for a long moment, her mind working through the implications. When she finally spoke, her voice was grim. Because they're not just collective. They're singular. All of those individual Devourers we've been tracking. All those separate entities consuming worlds across the galaxy, Oreo. They're not separate at all. They're limbs of a single, impossibly vast intelligence. The team stared at her in stunned silence. Engineer Mokhtal's tentacles writhed in distress as he processed what this meant. A consciousness that spans multiple star systems? That's impossible. The neural lag alone would make coordination impossible. Not if they exist partially outside normal spacetime, Elena said, her excitement growing despite the terrifying implications. Look at these quantum signatures in their neural traffic. They're using principles we don't even understand to maintain instantaneous communication across impossible distances. Dr. Quinteri, who had been silent until now, suddenly straightened in her chair. If they're operating outside normal spacetime, then they might be vulnerable to quantum disruption on a scale we never considered. Elena nodded, her mind already racing ahead to new possibilities. Exactly. But we'd need to create a disruption large enough to affect their entire network simultaneously. We're not talking about jamming their communications or we're talking about attacking the fundamental structure of their consciousness. Over the next few days, the team worked with desperate intensity to understand their enemy's true nature. They discovered that the Devourers had been active for far longer than anyone realized. Deep space archaeology revealed traces of their passage dating back millions of years, suggesting they moved through the galaxy in vast cycles, consuming everything and then retreating to digest their harvest. We're not the first, Elena realized as she studied the ancient traces. There have been other galactic civilizations, other attempts to stop them, and they all failed. But the historical data also revealed something else. In several instances, the Devourers had retreated unexpectedly, abandoning systems they could have easily consumed. Elena pored over these anomalies, looking for patterns that might explain what had driven them away. Here, she said, pointing to a star chart showing the Andromedan spiral. 37 million years ago, they were consuming worlds in this region when they suddenly stopped. All traces of their activity ceased for approximately 800,000 years. Lieutenant Commander Vash leaned over her shoulder, studying the data. What happened? Did they encounter resistance? No sign of any advanced civilizations in the region during that time period, Elena replied. But look at this. She highlighted a series of quantum resonance readings from the period. There was massive quantum instability throughout the region, natural, as far as we can tell, caused by the collision of two dark matter streams. The implications hit the team like a physical blow. The Devourers could be stopped, but only by quantum disruption on a scale that would reshape local spacetime. Elena began to understand why her plan had seemed so impossible to the Galactic Council. She wasn't just proposing to build a weapon, she was proposing to create an artificial quantum catastrophe. The modified resonance chambers, Elena said slowly. If we tune them to the right frequencies and link them in a quantum cascade pattern, we could create the same kind of instability that drove them away before. And probably tear apart half the galaxy in the process, Mokhtal added grimly. Elena stared at the data, weighing the terrible mathematics of survival. The Devourers will consume everything anyway. At least this way, we have a chance to save something. The work that followed was the most dangerous and demanding of Elena's career. The team pushed themselves beyond their physical and mental limits, modifying alien technology in ways that defied every safety protocol ever written. They were essentially building a quantum bomb large enough to affect an entity that existed across multiple star systems. The other species continued to mock Elena's efforts, but the tone of their criticism was changing. Desperation was creeping into their voices as more worlds fell to the Devourers. The combined fleets had won exactly 0 engagements against the enemy, and conventional resistance was crumbling. Elena ignored the outside voices, focusing entirely on the work at hand. She had assembled a team of brilliant misfits, and together they were creating something that had never existed before: a weapon designed to kill a god. As the 3rd week began, Elena stood before the modified resonance chambers, their crystalline structures humming with barely contained energy. The quantum readings were off the charts, and the station's AI had issued 17 separate warnings about the danger of continuing the experiment. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Zixathara said quietly, "The calculations show a 93% probability that activating this device will destroy the entire Kepler system." Elena nodded grimly. "And a 100% probability that doing nothing will result in the destruction of every system in the galaxy?" "I'll take those odds. The time for testing was over. In 48 hours, the Devourers would reach the outer colonies of the core systems." Elena's impossible weapon was ready, but using it would require courage that bordered on madness. Good thing she had always been a little mad. The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council was chaos. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as the Devourers' advance accelerated beyond all predictions. The Tau Ceti system had fallen in less than 6 hours. Proxima Centauri was under assault, its 3 billion inhabitants evacuating in panic as the enemy consumed their worlds from within. Elena watched the proceedings from her private communication channel aboard Kepler Station, her face grim as she listened to the desperate voices of beings who had spent weeks mocking her efforts. The irony wasn't lost on her that they were now begging for her help. "Dr. Vasquez," Chancellor Vextar's voice crackled through the static-filled transmission, "our combined fleets are being systematically destroyed. The Devourers are anticipating every move we make. We need your weapon operational immediately." "My weapon isn't ready for field deployment," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose. "But there is another option." The council chamber fell silent. Elena could see the desperation in their faces, the last remnants of their pride crumbling under the weight of imminent extinction. "I can bring the quantum cascade device to the Devourers," she continued. "My team has calculated that detonating it within their primary neural cluster should create enough quantum disruption to sever their collective consciousness." Ambassador Kethrax's mandibles clicked nervously. "You're talking about a suicide mission. Even if you could reach their central mass, the device would destroy you along with them." "Not necessarily," Elena said, displaying her tactical projections. "The quantum cascade will create a localized space-time distortion. If we time it correctly and position ourselves at the edge of the effect radius, we might survive long enough to escape through the quantum tunnel the explosion creates." "Might survive." The Syrian delegate's voice rose in disbelief. "You're asking us to stake the fate of the galaxy on might?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "You're already staking the fate of the galaxy on conventional tactics that have failed every single time. At least my plan has a chance of working." The debate that followed was brief and heated. The council members argued among themselves while Elena waited, watching the tactical displays that showed the Devourers' relentless advance. Every minute they delayed was another world that would be consumed. Finally, Chancellor Vexatar called for order. "Dr. Vasquez, what do you need from us?" "A fast ship, preferably something that can survive quantum storms," Elena replied. "And I need every available fleet to create a diversion while we approach the Devourer's central mass. They'll need to draw the enemy's attention long enough for us to get into position. That's asking our fleets to sacrifice themselves," protested the Altarian representative. "Yes," Elena said simply, "it is. But they're going to die anyway if we don't try this. At least this way. Their sacrifice will mean something." Within hours, Elena's team was aboard the experimental ship Quantum Dancer, a Zephyrian vessel designed to navigate unstable space-time regions. The ship's crystalline hull resonated with the same frequencies as the quantum cascade device, making it the only vessel that might survive close proximity to their weapon. As they departed Kepler Station, Elena stood on the bridge watching the stars streak past. Behind them, the station's automated systems were already beginning to evacuate the facility. If her plan failed, there would be nothing left to return to. "Dr. Vasquez," Captain Thorex said from his position at the tactical station. Long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements. Every species is committing their remaining forces to this diversion. Elena nodded grimly. Ships from dozens of worlds were converging on the Devourer's advance formations, buying time with their lives. It was the largest military operation in galactic history, and it was based entirely on the theories of a human scientist that most of them still considered insane. The journey to the Devourer's central mass took 18 hours, during which Elena's team made final preparations for what they all knew might be their last mission. Dr. Zixathera worked to refine the quantum targeting systems, while Engineer Mokhtal ran continuous diagnostics on the Cascade device itself. The neural signature is getting stronger, Dr. Quinteri reported as they approached the edge of Devourer space. The collective consciousness is more concentrated here than anywhere else we've detected. Elena studied the readings, her excitement growing despite the danger, because this is where it really lives. Everything else we've been fighting is just an extension of this central intelligence. The first Devourer ships appeared on their sensors when they were still 3 light hours from their target. The enemy vessels were unlike anything in the galactic databases or organic structures that seemed to shift and flow as they moved, adapting their configuration to optimize for whatever task they were performing. "They're beautiful," Lieutenant Commander Vash whispered, staring at the tactical display. "Like living art." "Don't let their appearance fool you," Elena warned. "Every one of those ships contains billions of absorbed consciousnesses. They're not just alive RO. They're repositories of every civilization the Devourers have ever consumed." As they penetrated deeper into enemy space, the quantum cascade device began to resonate with the Devourer's neural emissions. The effect was unsettling, causing headaches and disorientation among the crew, as their own neural patterns tried to synchronize with the alien consciousness. "The diversion fleets have engaged the enemy," Captain Thorek reported, his voice grim. "They're taking heavy casualties, but they're holding the Devourer's attention." Elena watched the tactical displays showing the massive battle raging across multiple star systems. Thousands of ships were dying to give her team this one chance, and she felt the weight of their sacrifice pressing down on her. "There," Dr. Zixathera called out, pointing to the main display, the central neural cluster. Elena stared at what appeared to be a small moon, its surface writhing with organic neural pathways that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. It was beautiful and terrifying, a living brain the size of a planetary body. "That's it," she breathed. "That's the mind behind the Devourers." As they approached their target, Elena felt a strange sensation, as if something vast and ancient was becoming aware of their presence. The neural cluster's patterns shifted, and she realized with growing horror that the Devourer intelligence was studying them just as intensely as they were studying it. "Dr. Vasquez," Dr. Quinteri said urgently, "I'm detecting massive quantum fluctuations around the neural cluster. It's trying to create a defense against our weapon." Elena smiled grimly. "Too late. We're already here." She activated the quantum cascade device, feeling the ship vibrate as energies beyond human. Comprehension began to build, toward a crescendo that would either save the galaxy or destroy it. The Devourer intelligence screamed across every frequency as it realized what was about to happen. For the first time in its impossibly long existence, it faced something it couldn't predict, couldn't adapt to, couldn't control. It faced the chaotic unpredictability of human determination. The quantum cascade began with a sound that existed beyond hearing, a vibration that resonated through space-time itself. Elena watched the readings on her console climb past every safety threshold as the device built toward critical resonance. The Devourer neural cluster below them pulsed frantically, its bioluminescent patterns shifting from ordered sequences to chaotic bursts of desperate activity. "Neural feedback is increasing exponentially," Dr. Zixathera reported, their crystalline exoskeleton now glowing white-hot with the strain of processing the conflicting data streams. "The collective consciousness is trying to isolate itself from the quantum disruption, but the cascade is propagating faster than they can compensate." Elena felt a moment of savage satisfaction as she watched the ancient intelligence struggle against her weapon. For millions of years, the Devourers had consumed civilizations with the casual efficiency of a farmer harvesting grain. Now for the first time they were experiencing fear. "Quantum tunnel forming," Engineer Mokhtal called out, his tentacles dancing across the controls as he fought to maintain ship stability. The space-time distortion is creating a passage, but it's highly unstable. The view outside the ship was becoming increasingly surreal. Reality seemed to fold in on itself as the quantum cascade warped local space-time. Stars stretched into impossible spirals, and the laws of physics bent under the assault of energies that shouldn't exist. But even as the weapon performed beyond Elena's wildest hopes, she could see that something was wrong. The Devourer intelligence wasn't just fighting the quantum disruption across, it was adapting to it. Impossible, Dr. Quinteri breathed, staring at her readings. It's learning to exist within the quantum chaos. The neural patterns are shifting to accommodate the disruption. Elena's blood ran cold as she understood what was happening. The Devourer's greatest strength had always been their ability to adapt, to turn any attack into a source of new knowledge. Even her quantum weapon, designed to operate outside their comprehension, was becoming just another challenge for them to overcome. How long until they adapt completely? She demanded. At their current rate of learning, Dr. Zixthera calculated, approximately 4 minutes. Elena stared at the countdown timer, her mind racing through possibilities. 4 minutes wasn't enough time to complete the cascade sequence. The weapon would fail, the Devourers would learn to defend against quantum attacks, and the galaxy would fall. But then she remembered something from her years of studying human psychology, something that had always set her species apart from others. Humans didn't just adapt to chaos or morale, they thrived in it. They made chaos their ally. Shut down the cascade sequence, she ordered. What? Captain Thorek roared. Are you insane? This is our only chance. No, Elena said, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. This is exactly what they expect us to do. They're adapting to our weapon because it follows logical parameters. But what if we don't give them logic to work with? She began entering new commands into the quantum device, override codes that would destabilize the entire system. We're not going to create a controlled quantum cascade. We're going to create quantum chaos on a scale that even we can't predict. That's suicide, Dr. Quinteri protested. Random quantum fluctuations could tear apart reality itself. Exactly, Elena replied grimly. The Devourers can adapt to anything they can understand or predict, but they can't adapt to pure chaos because chaos, by definition, has no pattern to learn from. The neural cluster below them pulsed with what could only be described as confusion as Elena's. Modifications took effect. The Devourer intelligence had been preparing defenses against a structured attack, but Elena was no longer giving it structure to defend against. Quantum coherence breaking down across all spectrums. Engineer Mokhtal reported, his voice filled with a mixture of terror and admiration. Whatever you're doing, it's creating interference patterns that shouldn't be possible. Elena watched her team work with desperate efficiency to implement her insane plan. They were brilliant scientists, each one cast out by their own people for thinking too far outside conventional parameters. Now their ability to embrace the impossible was humanity's last hope. Random quantum bursts initiating, Dr. Zixthera announced. The neural cluster is experiencing massive feedback loops. It's trying to process pattern data that doesn't exist. Below them, the Devourer intelligence was writhing in what could only be described as agony. For an entity that existed through perfect order and predictable adaptation, Elena's chaos weapon was the ultimate torture. It was like trying to solve an equation where the numbers changed every time you looked at them. Neural cascade propagating across the collective network, Captain Thorek reported with growing excitement. The disruption is spreading to every Devourer unit in the galaxy. Elena allowed herself a moment of hope as the reports came in. Across dozens of star systems, Devourer forces were stopping mid-assault. Their perfect coordination shattered by the chaos flowing through their shared consciousness. Ships that had moved with mechanical precision were now drifting aimlessly as their controlling intelligence struggled to process the impossible data. But the victory came at a cost. The quantum chaos was spreading beyond Elena's control, creating reality storms that threatened to consume entire star systems. The weapon was working, but it was also tearing apart the fabric of space-time itself. We need to get out of here, Lieutenant Commander Vash called out as the ship's hull began to buckle under the strain of existing within the chaos field. The quantum tunnel is collapsing. Elena looked at her readings one last time, confirming that the chaos cascade was stable and self-sustaining. The Devourer intelligence was trapped in an endless loop of trying to comprehend the incomprehensible, its vast consciousness paralyzed by the paradox Elena had created. "All hands, prepare for quantum tunnel transit," she ordered, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. The quantum dancer shot through the collapsing tunnel like a bullet fired through a closing door. Reality warped around them as they escaped the chaos field, emerging into normal space just as the quantum storm reached its peak intensity. Behind them, the Devourer neural cluster imploded in a burst of impossible light that existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. The ancient intelligence, older than most galaxies, screamed once across every frequency known to science before falling silent forever. Elena slumped in her chair, exhaustion hitting her like a physical blow. They had done it. They had killed a godlike intelligence with a weapon made of pure chaos. But as she looked at the readings showing the quantum storm spreading across local space, she wondered if they had saved the galaxy or doomed it to a different kind of destruction. Only time would tell if humanity's greatest victory would also be its greatest mistake. But for now, the Devourers were silent, and the galaxy was free. The woman they had all laughed at had proven them wrong one final time. 3 days after the quantum chaos weapon's detonation, Elena stood in the emergency medical bay of the rescue ship, Stellar Hope, watching the aftermath of humanity's most desperate gambit unfold across the galaxy. The quantum storms had indeed spread far beyond the Devourer neural cluster, but not in the catastrophic way she had feared. Instead of tearing apart reality, the chaos fields had created what Dr. Quinteri described as quantum antibodies, self-limiting disturbances that consumed themselves as they expanded. The galaxy was wounded but not destroyed, scarred by reality storms that would take centuries to fully heal but ultimately stable. "Dr. Vasquez," a familiar voice called out. Elena turned to see Chancellor Vextar approaching, his ancient Centaurian features showing a mixture of exhaustion and something she had never seen before, genuine respect. "Chancellor," Elena replied wearily, "I assume you're here for a full report on the quantum weapon's effects." "Among other things," Vextar said, settling into a chair beside her bed. "But first I wanted to personally deliver the galaxy's gratitude. The Devourer fleets have stopped completely. Every ship, every entity, every trace of their intelligence has gone silent." Elena nodded, unsurprised. The chaos cascade would have propagated through their entire collective consciousness. Without their central intelligence to coordinate them, the individual units are just empty shells. The combined fleets are reporting that Devourer ships are actually dissolving, Vextar continued, as if whatever force held them together has simply stopped. Through the medical bay's viewport, Elena could see the distant glow of reality storms still crackling across nearby star systems. The chaos weapon had worked exactly as she'd hoped, too well perhaps. The ancient intelligence that had threatened the galaxy was gone, but the scars of its destruction would be visible for millennia. "There will be consequences," Elena said quietly. "The quantum disruption has destabilized several star systems. Some worlds will become uninhabitable due to the reality storms. But the galaxy survived," Vextar replied. "That's more than anyone dared hope 3 days ago." Over the following weeks, as Elena and her team recovered from their ordeal, reports continued to pour in from across the galaxy. The Devourer threat was completely eliminated, but the true scope of Elena's achievement was only beginning to be understood. Archaeological teams examining the remains of consumed worlds made startling discoveries. The Devourers hadn't just absorbed matter and energy, they had preserved the consciousness patterns of every being they had consumed over millions of years. When their collective intelligence died, those patterns had been released in a cascade of quantum echoes. "We're detecting ghost signals," Dr. Zixthera reported during one of their recovery sessions. "Consciousness patterns from civilizations that were consumed thousands of years ago. They're not truly alive, but they're present." Elena studied the data with growing wonder. The quantum chaos hadn't just destroyed the Devourers, it had inadvertently created the galaxy's first encounter with genuine digital afterlife. Billions of consciousness patterns were now existing as quantum ghosts, neither alive nor dead, but something entirely new. "They're trying to communicate," Lieutenant Commander Vash added, his own injuries slowly healing. were receiving structured signals on frequencies that match ancient civilization databases. The implications were staggering. Elena's weapon hadn't just saved the current galactic community au revoir. It had potentially restored contact with every civilization the Devourers had ever consumed. The knowledge and wisdom of millions of years of galactic history was suddenly accessible. But the most significant change was in how the other species viewed humanity. The mockery and dismissal that had characterized their attitude toward Elena and her people had been replaced by something approaching awe. The primitive species from a single world had accomplished what the combined wisdom of dozens of advanced civilizations could not. The Galactic Council has voted, Chancellor Vexitar informed Elena during one of his visits. Humanity is being offered a permanent seat on the ruling body, with full authority over quantum research and unconventional weapons development. Elena smiled wryly. Let me guess, they want to make sure the next time someone thinks of a crazy plan, they're the ones in control of it. Something like that, Vexitar admitted. Though I prefer to think of it as recognizing that humanity brings a unique perspective to galactic problems. The truth was more complex than either of them wanted to acknowledge. Elena's success had forced the galaxy to confront an uncomfortable reality. That their advanced civilizations, for all their sophistication and technology, had become trapped by their own success. They had grown so accustomed to logical, predictable solutions that they had lost the ability to think truly outside established parameters. Humanity, still young and chaotic, had retained the capacity for desperate innovation that their more evolved neighbors had lost. In their rejection of conventional wisdom and their willingness to embrace impossible odds, humans had proven themselves to be exactly what the galaxy needed when facing truly alien threats. There's something else, Vexitar said, his voice growing serious. We've been analyzing the quantum storms, trying to understand their long-term effects. Dr. Quinteri's team believes they may have created something unprecedented. Elena raised an eyebrow. More unprecedented than quantum ghosts of dead civilizations? The reality distortions appear to have thinned the barriers between parallel quantum states, Vexitar explained. We may have inadvertently opened doorways to alternate versions of our galaxy. Elena stared at him, processing the implications. Her chaos weapon hadn't just saved their galaxy, it had potentially connected them to infinite variations of themselves. The possibilities were both thrilling and terrifying. So we went from facing extinction to having access to infinite realities, Elena mused. I suppose that's an improvement. The Council is concerned about the implications, Vexitar continued. They want to establish protocols for dealing with parallel dimensions, quantum ghost communications, and reality storm management. Elena laughed, the sound echoing through the medical bay. 6 months ago, they thought I was insane for suggesting that collective consciousness could be disrupted with quantum chaos. Now they want me to write protocols for managing interdimensional contact? The galaxy has learned to respect human intuition, Vexitar said simply, even when we don't understand it. As Elena looked out at the stars, still flickering with the aftermath of her impossible weapon, she felt a profound sense of completion. The woman who had been laughed at and dismissed had not only saved the galaxy but fundamentally changed how it thought about the universe itself. The enemy that had once feared her name was gone, but Elena suspected that her reputation was just beginning to grow. In a galaxy now connected to infinite possibilities, humanity's gift for chaos might be more valuable than anyone could imagine. She was no longer the crazy human with impossible theories. She was the architect of a new age of galactic evolution, and the universe would never be the same. 6 months later, Elena stood before a very different galactic council than the one that had reluctantly authorized her desperate mission. The circular chamber was now filled with representatives not just from the known species, but from quantum echoes of civilizations thought lost forever. Ancient beings existed as holographic manifestations, their consciousness patterns stabilized through technology that Elena's team had developed from studying the quantum ghosts. The seat reserved for Earth's representative was no longer at the periphery of the chamber but positioned prominently near the Chancellor's podium. Elena wore the simple blue uniform of the Human Quantum Research Division, a new organization that had become the galaxy's primary authority on interdimensional phenomena. Dr. Vasquez, Chancellor Vextar began, his voice carrying across the chamber with newfound respect. Your latest report indicates that we've established stable contact with 47 parallel galaxy variants. The implications are staggering. Elena nodded, consulting her datapad. The quantum doorways are stable but limited. We can exchange information and small objects, but mass transit remains impossible with current technology. However, the knowledge exchange has already yielded breakthrough discoveries in medicine, physics, and consciousness research. Around the chamber, delegates from dozens of species listened with rapt attention. The same beings who had once dismissed her theories now hung on her every word. Elena found the reversal amusing, though she was careful not to let her satisfaction show. The quantum ghost civilizations have been particularly helpful, she continued. Their perspective on galactic history spans millions of years, and they've identified 3 other extinction-level threats that we may face in the coming millennia. A new voice spoke from the chamber, Irao, one that still sent chills down Elena's spine. It belonged to Keftai, the quantum echo of a civilization consumed by the Devourers over 200,000 years ago. The ancient being appeared as a shimmering construct of light and mathematical equations. The young Chaos Bringer speaks truth, Keftai said, their voice resonating across multiple dimensions. We have witnessed the patterns of cosmic predation. The Devourers were but one iteration of universal entropy made manifest. There will be others. Elena had grown accustomed to being called the Chaos Bringer by the quantum ghosts. To them, her weapon wasn't just a tool of destruction, but a fundamental force of change that had reshaped the nature of existence itself. They spoke of chaos as if it were a divine principle, and Elena as its mortal avatar. Which brings us to the proposal before the Council today, Chancellor Vextar continued. Dr. Vasquez, would you please explain the Quantum Defense Initiative? Elena stood, activating the holographic display that showed her latest project. The QDI is designed to monitor the space between galaxies for signs of similar collective entities. Using the quantum storm networks as early warning systems, we can detect the approach of extinction-level threats decades before they reach inhabited systems. The display showed a web of quantum sensors extending throughout the local group of galaxies, each one tuned to detect the specific signatures of hive mind intelligences or reality-consuming entities. It was an ambitious project that would require the cooperation of every major civilization. More importantly, Elena continued, we're developing response protocols that don't rely on conventional warfare. Each threat will be unique, requiring equally unique solutions. The QDI will maintain teams of unconventional thinkers from every species, ready to devise impossible solutions to impossible problems. Dr. Zixthera, who now served as Elena's deputy director, added their voice to the presentation. We call them chaos cells or small groups of creative misfits who specialize in thinking outside established parameters. Each cell operates independently, developing multiple response strategies for theoretical threats. The irony wasn't lost on Elena that the galaxy's new defense strategy was based entirely on the same kind of unconventional thinking that had gotten her and her team exiled from their respective societies. The rejects and misfits were now the galaxy's first line of defense against cosmic annihilation. Captain Thorek, who had accepted Elena's offer to lead the QDI's military division, spoke from his position near the tactical displays. The first chaos cells are already operational. We have teams working on responses to reality viruses, quantum plagues, temporal predators, and dimensional parasites. Threats that don't exist? Asked the Syrian representative. Yet, Elena corrected. Remember, the Devourers operated for millions of years before we detected them. The universe is vast and old, full of dangers we can't imagine. The QDI's job is to imagine them anyway. The debate that followed was vigorous but respectful. Elena noted with amusement that no one questioned the fundamental premise of her proposal, Awin, that the galaxy needed to prepare for impossible threats using impossible solutions. Her credibility was now beyond dispute. As the Council voted to approve the QDI with unanimous consent, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been a laughingstock, a human with crazy theories about alien consciousness. Now she was the architect of the galaxy's new golden age. The quantum storms had indeed scarred local space-time, but they had also opened doorways to possibilities that no one had dreamed existed. Trade with parallel galaxies was revolutionizing technology. The quantum ghosts were sharing knowledge that advanced every field of study, and the threat of extinction had been replaced by the promise of infinite exploration. After the council session, Elena stood once again in an observation lounge, looking out at stars that now flickered with quantum fire. Her team of former outcasts had become the galaxy's most respected scientists. The woman they had all laughed at was now the one they turned to when facing the impossible. Dr. Quinteri joined her at the viewport, her crystalline features reflecting the strange light of the quantum storms. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? Opening all these doorways, changing the fundamental nature of reality?" Elena considered the question. The universe was already changing. The Devourers proved that stagnation leads to extinction. We just chose to embrace change rather than resist it. And if we face something worse than the Devourers? Elena's smile was confident, filled with the hard-won knowledge that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their technology or their numbers, but in their willingness to attempt the impossible when all conventional options had failed. "Then we'll do what humans do best," she said. "We'll think of something crazy. Everyone will tell us it won't work, and then we'll prove them wrong." The galaxy no longer laughed at Dr. Elena Vasquez, but across the infinite quantum realities now accessible through her chaos weapon, there were surely other versions of herself still fighting for recognition, still struggling to convince skeptics that impossible solutions were humanity's greatest gift to the universe. She raised her hand to the viewport in a silent salute to all the Elena Vasquezes who were still fighting their own battles in their own realities. They would find their own impossible solutions, save their own galaxies, and earn their own respect. After all, that's what humans did. They turned laughter into legend, one impossible victory at a time. The enemy that had once feared her name was gone, but Elena's legend was just beginning. In a universe now infinite with possibility, there would always be new challenges, new threats, new reasons for the galaxy to need the chaotic brilliance of human innovation, and Elena Vasquez would be ready for all of them.